What's going on with you, gang? Today we got Final Affliction, man. This man was fatally attacked by escape circus elephant on Rampage. Man, how the fuck you guys let a whole circus elephant fucking escape? Let's start there. Let's start. How FYB J man say it? Let's start there. Let's start there. Let's start how they let a big ass circus animal motherfucking escape. Let's start there. Overwhelming. But now we about to get right up into this shit, gang. I ain't gonna lie to you. Let's get it. Let's get it.
Today's episode, an unidentified man sneaks into a circus at night to free all of the animals without being caught. The next day, a freed circus elephant roams the nearby city, terrified and lost, leading it to attack. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the horrifying circus elephant attack on
Like he said, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Stop playing with me, y'all. Stop playing with me. And a lot of y'all be coming back to this channel and watching shit. You might as well just sub, like, be a part of the gang, be a part of the squad, comment, like, nigga, be a part of the shit. Like, it's
65-year-old Maximilian. Welcome to Final Affliction.
Final Affliction.
Circus Francordia has been operational since 1976, and they have it all.
Damn.
Trapeze artists, clowns, magicians, food, and rides. But what they're really known for is their animal acts, especially...
Bruh, he's in there with a whole tiger. Like, imagine just eating popcorn and just... just, damn.
The Elephant Parade, where dozens of the world's biggest mammals are shown off with their masterful tricks and ability to wow crowds of thousands of people at a time. Germany is one of the very few countries in the world to still have an operational circus. Some, like Cirque du Soleil, have done away with animal acts entirely. It's understandable, since accounts of animal abuse in circuses have plagued their history ever since they started doing the rounds hundreds of years ago. Animal activists, bringing a better understanding of what is humane and what is not, led to animals on the stage being slowly phased out of practice. The handful of places that still have animal shows are under constant scrutiny. They follow procedures and take care of their animals to the utmost degree of safety that is possible. Unlike others, Circus Francordia prides itself for its proper handling of their animal stars. June 14th, 2015, was a busy night as usual for the performers of Francordia, both for the humans and the animals, that is. The animals ended their shows at 10, leaving the acrobats and clowns to continue their spectacular feats until midnight. Keeping the lions, tigers, bears, and massive elephants up any later would be disastrous. As well-trained as these beasts are, they get tired, too. Their handlers herded them back to their enclosures, filling their feeding troughs as they went. Most of the men and women managing the animals behind the colossal lighted stage were in full costume. They needed to get back to their posts for the next performance, but the routine was nothing new to them by now. Within minutes, every animal had a full bowl of food and water, and their cages were securely fastened. So, with only the sounds of cheering crowds in the distance, the beasts, large and small, settled in for the night. It's somewhere in this 2-hour window that a human with nefarious plans began moving around between the cages. A man, who had just been a spectator in the crowd a few moments ago, slipped out of the main entrance when the final elephant parade had finished. It took him 20 minutes to work his way around the circus grounds, making sure to remain in the shadows, until he reached the very back entrance. From there, you could reach the animal enclosures, a spacious area the size of a football field, with a practice area at its center. On the outskirts of the fenced-off field, cages and trailers dotted the landscape. Lions growled sleepily, and every now and then an elephant would snort as they drank and ate their evening rations. The man's plan was to open every cage he could reach and
What? That sounds like bullshit.
to leave the gate open for them so that they could make their way to freedom. Whether or not he convinced himself that he could give the animals freedom, or maybe he just wanted to spread as much chaos by letting dozens of confused and dangerous animals loose in the streets, there's just no way to tell what the madman's thought process was. The closest metal cage to him held an elephant named Baby. She had been with the circus since she was born 34 years ago. The staff affectionately called her Baby because she was such a well-mannered and even cuddlesome animal. The performers liked to sneak her treats when her trainer wasn't looking, and she was a definite favorite of the employees. The man grabbed the thick metal handle of the padlock and dragged it back as quietly as he could, but the metals squealed against each other, echoing horribly across the field. The animals were startled by the sound, and there was a flurry of movement from their cages. The bears pawed noisily at the bars, the lions roared and growled, and the elephants stomped with agitation. Even the llamas and zebras at the other side of the field started neighing. The upsurge in noise and movement alerted the two guards that were on the far side of the field. They immediately went around with their flashlights, checking on each individual cage. The man at Baby's cage fled into the darkness. He'd have to rethink his strategy and come back another night, maybe with some oil to grease up the noisy clasps. By the time the guards reached the middle of the field, he was already out of the main back gate. He didn't bother to snap the bolt back in place behind him. Instead, he'd only drawn the gate closed, essentially leaving it open, even though it looked locked to someone casually walking by. That's also the state he'd left Baby's cage in. The night wore on. The guards, the staff, and even Baby were completely unaware of the unbolted cage and gate. The performers finished their acts, and the spectators made their way home. Slowly, Circus Francordia became completely silent. The only movement was the guards patrolling the grounds every hour or so. At around 4 in the morning, it was still dark out when the guards made their final scan of the grounds, tents, and stalls. Most of the animals were still fast asleep, but some were starting to stir. Baby was one of those early risers. When the flashlights passed her enclosure, she decided it was time to have some water before catching another hour or two of sleep before it got light out. When her large frame skimmed the gate that had been open all along on her way to her water trough, it swung open with a soft whine. Baby, curious, nosed the rails with her trunk. The gate opened completely under her gentle prodding. The enormous animal was remarkably silent as she gingerly stepped out of her cage. She'd never been without a human companion outside of her holdings, so this was a new experience for her, and she inspected every nook and cranny of the ground below her and the fence behind her cage, making her way silently to the open gate that was only a few feet away. To her surprise, the gate swung open at the touch of her trunk, too. Her timid exploration had now turned into an exciting adventure.
There's police
and
right
Baby
there.
didn't hesitate to step out into the street. On the ground,
There was police right there, and they didn't see me. You're not telling me them flashing lights is not police, bro.
but at the touch of her trunk, too. Her timid exploration had now turned into an exciting adventure, and Baby didn't hesitate to step out into the street. On the ground, she found a discarded hamburger that she didn't like the taste of, then a few lone French fries lying on the ground. She decided that these were delicious, and she ventured out further to see if she could find some more. She nosed a few trash cans and stuck her trunk into a drain hole, wandering farther and farther away from her familiar surroundings. When the darkness started turning opaque on the horizon, Baby decided it was time to go home. It would be breakfast soon, and besides the few potato chips, she hadn't found anything edible on her way. But Baby realized that she was utterly and completely lost. Even though she was less than a mile away from the circus, she had no idea how to get back. Starting to panic, she allowed her nose to lead her. The only friendly smell underneath the oil, tar, and concrete smell of the city of Bunchen was the scent of foliage, trees, and dirt somewhere in the distance. So she followed it, not knowing where else to go. Right on the outskirts of Bunchen, a little under 2 miles away from the circus, there is a forested area that locals like to stroll around in, and children often play games during the summer months. It offered Baby the
No.
protective canopy of the trees and a place to hide as the street.
And that elephant is hungry. Hungry. And he's Bambi, baby, about to eat some babies.
Became busy with early risers on their way to work or out for a walk. It's only thanks to the semi-darkness that no one noticed the massive animals strolling through the streets. The
Ain't no
unfamiliar
way.
smells and noises were too much for Baby. She quickened her pace when she saw the trees and hid amongst the branches, working her way deep enough into the brush to hide her completely from the nearest road. As the circus woke up and the rounds to feed the animals and clean up last night's mess began, the workers made their way slowly past the animals' cages. Baby's enclosure was at the farthest side of the field, and they'd reach her at the very end of their rounds. As the circus workers made their morning rounds, another man was getting ready to start his day. Maximilian was newly retired, and at 65, he wasn't quite ready to get out of his years-long routine of getting up early in the morning like he did when he worked as an engineer at the city's power station. This Sunday was like any other day he'd had this past year since he'd retired. He put on his walking shoes and headed out to the hiking trails in the forest behind his house. He'd usually spend about 2 hours taking a leisurely stroll, stopping only to pick up a can or a discarded newspaper that loiterers had left behind. He liked keeping his favorite route clean so much that he even carried a trash bag with him every morning to maximize his cleanup. Once he was done, he planned on stopping at a bakery for some breakfast rolls that were still hot from the oven. Whistling, he walked, Baby cowered in fear just around the next crop of trees, and at the same time, the staff at Franconia saw the open cage and the gates standing ajar. As they raised the alarm, Maximilian came around the bend and stopped mid-whistle when he looked up and saw the impossibly enormous gray animal right in front of him. Baby, almost apoplectic with fear and confusion, stumbled backwards away from the stranger, making the horrible, high-pitched noise. But she backed into a large boulder that hit her painfully behind her back legs. A car alarm went off in the distance as Baby lunged forward in blind panic, the tiny human in front of her staring open-mouthed at the huge creature rearing up on its hind legs. The elephant screeched so loudly as she reared up that the shopkeepers a mile away heard it. Her front legs hit back down on the ground with such a force that the ground beneath Maximilian's feet quaked so hard that it knocked him down on all fours. With his head down, he didn't even see Baby rushing forward, running straight at him. The next moment, a massive foot came down on Max's back. 7 tons of force bore down on Maximilian, driving him several inches into the dirt. Every organ in his chest and abdomen exploded, and every bone along his spine was shattered into hundreds of pieces. The implosion was so forceful that pieces of his lungs and heart were catapulted into his throat and out of his mouth as the crushing weight forced everything inside his body to spew out of whatever it could find. Maximilian's death was almost instantaneous. In his right hand, he was still gripping the trash bag filled with a few cans and candy wrappers. That's how his poor wife found him 2 hours later when she went out looking for him. By that time, the police had already been called about the missing animal, and they descended upon the gruesome scene. Maximilian's wife was placed under sedation and treated for shock, but otherwise there were no other victims of the frightened elephant's fight. Baby was found behind another crop of trees and boulders, hiding from the approaching horde. The policemen were wise enough to wait for her handler to coax Baby out of the
Fuck
brush.
that. That animal need to be put down, first off. And secondly, that zoo need to be sued. Why ain't y'all got security strolling through there, making sure shit locked? That shit's crazy, man.
Baby ran to her master. The animal's relief was palpable in the air as the creature shook so violently from her ordeal that even her big ears were quivering. The decision was made that Baby probably didn't even know she'd harmed anyone, nor did she show even the slightest amount of violence toward any of the humans that approached her. Even Maximilian's wife agreed that the tragic events were the result of a panicked and frightened animal who meant no harm. So instead of subjecting Baby to an execution, she was moved to Safari Park Stukenbrock on the other side of the country. She now lives in a wide field of her very own, with 3 other elephant bulls to keep her company. And even though police could ascertain that the cage and gate were opened by a human, judging by the men's sized footprints leading to and from Baby's cage, the man in the night was never identified. He might have thought about coming back, but with the new security measures in place, that would be virtually impossible to achieve without detection. So we will probably never know the identity of the man responsible for the horrendous events of that day that led to...
He got a whole body on him, and y'all ain't going out there and looking for him? That's crazy.
To an innocent
got away with a whole body.
65-year-old man's terrifying final affliction.
Fucking wild. It's an innocent man that fucking died because you wanted to go out there and open up cages thinking it's ha. A whole innocent man fucking died. Doing his morning routine. And then that shit's crazy. All it can end that quick. That quick. Anything can fucking happen. That nigga didn't even know he was gonna be in front of a fucking elephant. That's crazy. But if you made it this far, like, comment, share, and hit that sub button. I love y'all, gang. RP that man for real. He didn't even deserve that shit, dog.